Welcome to Human at the Helm, the show where we explore what it really takes to navigate marketing in an AI-driven world. I'm your host, Veronica Markol, and every episode I sit down with agency leaders, CMOs, and innovators who are figuring out how to keep humans at the center while embracing the tools of the future. Today, I'm thrilled to have Scott Donnell, Managing Director at XO Agency, joining us. Scott brings a wealth of experience from working with global brands like Apple and Toyota, where he's honed a unique approach to blending strategic insight with creative excellence. What's particularly fascinating about Scott's journey and XO Agency's evolution is their forward-thinking approach to integrating AI, not just as a tool, but as a catalyst for redefining agency value, optimizing operations, and shifting towards a high-value consultancy model. Today, we'll dive into how agencies can navigate this evolving landscape to maintain creative differentiation and sustainable growth. Scott, I'm so excited because the things that we're going to talk more about today are really, I think, sort of revolutionary in the agency world. So I'm really excited to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, very, very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, Scott, before we get into the meat of the conversation, I was just hoping you could tell us a little bit more about XO Agency and your journey to get there and what it is that both you and XO do.
Yeah, thank you. We're about 8 years old now. I started it back in 2018 with a business partner at the time. And it was a lifelong kind of goal. Like if you asked me in college what I wanted to do, it was start something like XO. But it took me probably 15 or so years of gathering skills, building a network, understanding the business side of agency work, all those things, for it to be the right time to launch. So that was a big pivot for me of sort of taking that final step to like do your own thing. And it's been a pretty wild ride. You know, the first couple of years of a new business are difficult, but we've been very lucky to have a great roster of repeat clients and build really great relationships with a number of organizations really throughout the country. We're West Coast based, so we're design strategy is sort of our focus, really around brand. But most of the engagements that we do are at a change moment with a company when they're doing a brand refresh or they're rethinking something. We'll come in and help them strategically reposition who they are, sort of rediscover what their core values are, how they behave, that kind of thing. And then typically we will launch a website as a part of that. It's really brand strategy first, but anymore, I mean, the way you get that out is through digital channels. So almost every project has some kind of website launch as a part of it. So it's design strategy focused, but increasingly over time, increasingly technical. And that was a big stretch for me to grow into that space, but it's been great.
So it's been an interesting 8 years. Like a lot has changed in those 8 years. And when you talk about, being there to help organizations pivot at kind of critical times, that's, I think, a perfect lead in into this next question. And that is AI efficiency is leading to XO Agency reevaluating its pricing and even considering cutting costs. As I said, this is revolutionary information for the ad agency, right? Like for the ad agency world. And so I'd love it if you could elaborate on how AI is fundamentally changing your agency's value proposition and how you communicate that value to clients when production inputs are significantly reduced.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating time right now. I'm still sorting through these things. So a little bit of this I'm working on the fly with, but I do have an instinct right now that we're processing what to do with it, which is to actually lower prices a little bit. I'll get to sort of where that comes from, but the addition of or the emergence of AI into the agency business in the past couple of years for us it's been a radical transformation. Part of that is that I'm very excited about AI. My first reactions were sort of panic and fear when it really started to come out and be a powerful thing. But something I think about is that like culture and technology, they really influence each other and you cannot beat them. So as culture evolves, you have to find your way in the culture evolving. And the same thing with tech, that tech is going to influence culture and you can fight it all you want, but it's going to win. And so even if it's scary, even if there's, challenges with it, the question I ask for the business and for our work is, well, how do we make the best of this? How do we use it? How do we integrate it? We don't want to go faster than we need to, but these are very powerful capabilities that have come online, so we're adopting them quickly. But it's sort of it's fed through the whole way that we do business. We do have a creative, side of the business where it's sort of typical agency creative, where there's messaging, copywriting, lines and taglines, and those kinds of things around brand strategy, and then obviously visual identity visualization is a big part of things. But every element of that has been disrupted by AI. That to me, that's not a major statement, but it is funny when I'm, going through LinkedIn and seeing the conversation around AI. I see a lot of times people saying that, oh, it doesn't work that well for, certain kinds of creative, or it's not funny yet. It doesn't have humor. It hallucinates and makes mistakes. These things are all true, but I generally think when I read comments like that, that they're just using it wrong. That there are ways to use the generative AI that transform the way you do business. And if you don't use them that way, if you just keep going the way things were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that's going to work for a very limited amount of time. That there's a there's always a pressure to find efficiency with clients to like do better work for less. I think there's always that, but now there are fewer and fewer excuses to not go along with that. The production side of the business is just becoming a commodity. And we have to find as agencies, how do we create value within that environment? That if we're just providing the same thing that ChatGPT can provide, obviously there's no point in hiring us. So in the context of ChatGPT and generative video and all these other tools, how can an agency provide the same level of value? I think there's many ways to do that. And so that part, I'm not particularly scared about AI, but the production side of it, where we used to have a pretty big talent bench of copywriters, storyboard artists for the video and TV work that we do. It's not that hiring has gone to zero on that, but the contracts that we hand out for that kind of work is probably down 90%. Very, very specific things that will bring people in to support that. But what we need these days are more creative directors, like managers who can use the AI as an employee to help create work. And I should be clear too, like XO, nothing that we deliver is AI created. Like AI does not write our strategies, it does not write our copy, but it is a major collaborator as a part of the process. And that's, I think, the part that we've embraced the most is integrating it in as if it was a team member, but there's still someone at the end, like making the decisions and actually creating the final copy, creating the final design. But the way to get there has been, it's been truncated by 50%, 75%. It's the efficiencies are so radical that I think will inevitably be in a pricing conversation with clients around that, of either pivoting to justify the fees we used to charge, or if we're going to do the same things we used to do, probably charge less but do more.
So one of the things that I find really interesting about this is I have been doing this for a long time, and there's a lot that I could say about that. But one of them is, right, like when I first started in the agency world, we were sending film to magazines for our ads, right? So a lot of pivots. This one's really big. But what continues to fascinate me is it seems like the same problems still face agencies now that did in 2001 when I bought my agency. And one of the big ones, and it was a big conversation in like 2001, then in 2005, then in 2008, billable hours, right? Because in a lot of
Mhm.
ways, it's an adversarial relationship right from the get-go, because
Yeah.
as someone who does it hundreds of times, you know how long it takes to produce something, and you know where you can save time and how that can affect your value. But the simple fact of the matter is, clients always want it faster, better, cheaper. Like we used to have a saying: you can have it good and fast, you can have it fast and cheap, you can have it cheap and fast. I think that's how it is. But you can't have all three, right? Like you can't have all three. Well, AI is changing that to some degree now, isn't it? Right? It seems that if you've got the right human running it, good and fast and more affordable kind of start to seem like they're an option. And that seems kind of like what you're uncovering.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does matter what kind of agency business you're in and who's directing these things. My background is in creative, but over the course of my career, I really moved towards strategy. And so I'm sort of half and half as in terms of disciplines nowadays. And I think having that window into the strategy side of things, process, protocols, frameworks, the structure that's a part of strategy, and then the culture that's a part of creative, AI is changing both of those things. And so I think agencies that are purely production focused, which is probably heavy on billable hours, that's going to be really difficult because there's not a lot that you can productize or systematize in a production workflow, at least in the creative world. Like it sort of depends on every time being new, where on the strategy side of things, it's all about making a process. That's almost what a client is buying when they're engaging with a strategy firm is like, here's the frameworks that we've developed. Here's our IP that we have a team that's trained to sort of use this IP, but that's why you hire us. That works really, really well for adding AI to it. I think it helps the business itself by needing repeatable models and frameworks to process your strategy work into AI. You have to actually tighten those things up a little bit. And so that's actually been helpful for us as we've embraced AI. I'll give you an example of what I mean, how this works. When we have a new client, there's always a discovery process where we're learning a little bit about their business and their category, learning about their culture. So there's workshops, there's interviews. That's sort of the typical process that we start with. And those are templated. So it's the same kinds of activities that we'll do in those workshops, similar kinds of questions. And that's not in an attempt to like do less work for the same money. That's building on your learnings. Every time you do a project, you can sort of see and refine what works well, what are the trends that create good work or good outputs from these frameworks and these questions, workshop activities. So we systemize all those things so that they're repeatable, they're written down, they're documented. And because we've done that, we can then upload that into AI. We can have AI note takers be in those workshops so that we can combine our IP, the content that comes in from the workshop, and then the first kind of analysis of thinking trends using AI as a sort of a rhetorical device to like, what's the point of this conversation? AI is really, really good at that. We don't ask it, okay, well, write us like the new brand tagline. That's I mean, there's probably a place where AI is going to be good at that. That's where we still sort of lean in there. But as a junior strategist that's going to synthesize and surface insights and that kind of thing, AI is just absolutely fantastic at doing that. And so as we've moved closer to that, to get back to your original question, we actually don't do billable hours very often. Some clients require that. It's part of their procurement is you have to, bill that way. I don't love that because I think you're right. There is a adversarial issue that comes up immediately, especially the longer you're with a client, because we do really seek out long-term relationships. That you get really good at understanding their business and their category and the history and even sort of their culture of what gets approved and what doesn't, sort of how to navigate that through. So you get faster at things, and that's higher value to the client. And the agency is almost punished for that if you're billing hourly because it takes less time to do it every time. So we try to find I don't know if it's exactly value-based pricing, but we try to find a good middle road where we can do fixed engagements for the different milestones and activities that we're doing. And so they're deciding on what's the value of it. Okay, we'll pay you to create that. How long it takes, how many iterations. We can put caps on iterations just to have some kind of scope control. But I like getting out of that billable conversation, the billable hours conversation, so you can just focus on what you're creating. Is it solving the problems that the business is dealing with or not? Okay, if not, let's continue iterating, that kind of thing. That's a much better conversation than, or 80% through hours, we need to open a change order, all that kind of thing. AI is helping that be more efficient. So there's even fewer constraints on fixed work, I think, because we're not tracking time or just tracking value. But at the same time, because it's a little bit easier, a little bit more efficient to create options with messaging, with strategies. Even when you get into websites, like you can play with different sitemaps, different IA, information architectures. That should make the work better. So it doesn't necessarily take more time, but having that additional creative and collaborative capability by integrating AI, it makes the work better. And so should it cost more? That's where there's debates like, I don't think it should. I think there's going to be a downward pressure on prices, but it's early days, so we'll probably see how that actually works in the market.
So you brought up a bunch of stuff and you're right, it is early days. And so it's a tough balancing act, right? Because you're right, it's more efficient, but it also means that you can provide higher value. There's testing that you like, there's so much more that you can do to ensure what you're delivering is going to deliver. So I
Hmm.
think that's going to be really interesting. And the other thing for me that you talked about is, when you do project based or value based pricing, what's great about that for both sides is it really helps you make smarter business decisions because you have some idea of actually how to budget based on what your income is going to be or what your expenses are going to be depending on which side you're on. So I I love that approach and I think it's going to be really interesting to have a conversation in 6 months. And you also the other thing that you touched on that I think is another really interesting issue is that, where's the transparency? I started using chat in November of 2022, right? Like almost immediately. And
Yeah.
the question has always been how much do you reveal? What's the disclaimer that you put on the work? Because I don't want to take credit for work that's not mine, but also at this point, so much of what comes out of chat is based on my human context. So
Yeah.
I'd be really interesting to hear you talk a little bit more about, where's the line of, IP between AI and human.
Yeah. And part of that, it's a fascinating question because we do wrestle with this of how much should we be doing? How much do we communicate about that? We try to be really upfront with clients. I do think that's also something that savvy clients are probably thinking a lot about this of if I'm paying this agency all this money for this work, how much of it is just something I could have done with, an internal team and a couple AI subscriptions. So I think we want to be transparent on what we're using, how it feeds in. There's also some liability issues there as well that you want to make sure you're putting proprietary information in tools that you can't do that. Like some of these tools, it's not private. Um, there's considerations like that. I've even seen like some people sharing chat GPT transcripts or sharing between team members, which makes it a public link. And then all that's been exposed to Google now. So there's some, considerations of that sort here. But in terms of how it affects the business and the transparency around that, I think it's a higher level question of what kind of work are we focusing on as a business? If it can be easily replicated by ChatGPT or whatever tool it is, then that shouldn't be the center of the business. And this is where a lot of the disruption is. So like when EXO started, it used to be a little bit more team oriented. And so there'd be teams, they're sort of the standard, writer, designer, director, technologist kind of group on a project. And over time, it's moved more towards a consulting kind of model where we still have agency capability. We can produce things, but the health of our business is not based on that. Like back to my workshop example, that the value of that is in the models that you're using that have been refined over time. So there's experience, there's credibility out of that, learnings that you've taken. But then it's also the person in the room actually doing the workshop. That's a lot of the value, especially, and it's probably different in the different kinds of agency work streams, but with brand strategy in particular, so much of that is getting the client teams aligned around one idea that everyone has, their own subjective preferences that they're bringing in. And if we can get an executive team and a working team aligned around one thought, the new mission, the new values, et cetera, even like the language and the look, that's a successful brand. If everybody embodies it and they go out to the world with it proudly and they embrace it and they use it, it's going to work really well. When people don't quite embrace it, they don't quite love it, that's where brands tend to fail. And they don't get adopted. They don't really achieve what they're supposed to do. And that is something that a person needs to do that. Like a leader at the agency needs to take responsibility for aligning the client team around a concept. And that I think is worth a lot of money. That's what they're hiring us for. They're no longer hiring us for, the like bullet point copy of their proof points. Like that can just be done cheaper now. Uh, there's ethical considerations here that I do think a lot about. Like, I don't like the fact that I don't know what younger people are going to do. That's terrifying to me. I feel very fortunate that I'm sort of mid to late career. So like, I feel like I beat it just in terms of timing, that my value now is in direction, vision, strategy, that kind of thing. But if you're starting out and you just need to be a junior copywriter somewhere. Like I don't know what to do about that because that there's just less value there than there used to be, and it might just go away.
So when I'm not looking at you, it's because I am taking notes. Because right, like there you're calling out some things I know without my note taker, I'm gonna forget to bring them back, and so I'm gonna wanna
Right.
come back to that. I'm gonna wanna come back to when you're just starting out. But, one of the things that you were talking about was building consensus and how important that is to delivering your brand. And one
Mm.
of the things that I think oftentimes as marketers, we sometimes forget is people don't get that your brand isn't your logo, it isn't your tagline, it isn't right, it isn't those things. It's how your staff and your product deliver your promise.
Hmm.
And so when you talk about having the human context to be able to manage that process, and the first question out of the box was about going towards a high value consultancy, that's it, right? Like that's the high value. It's the
Yeah.
thing that AI, for all of its learning capabilities, just isn't going to be able to do. So that was
Yeah.
really what I took away from that is that really is an important part of the value that the human still adds. So
Yeah.
I do sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just one more comment on that because I think there's something about like the value of AI. Part of it is how it can process information and it has sort of all of human history's knowledge at you know a moment's glance. It could bring anything up. And so the value that we need to bring as people is not knowledge. Like that's sort of been documented and it's ready for everybody. And so any client, when they're doing a rebrand, could just bring up whatever tool they like and say, like, how should I think about this? What should I do? Like structure a rebrand plan for me. Like AI could do all that, like the knowledge is there, but that's not how humans work. That for if there's like a mid-level like marketing director that's been tasked with a brand project or even a campaign or some seasonal campaign, okay, they have an objective, the company's behind it. How do you then work with an agency, get concepts, bring that to like peer teams that have to sign off? Maybe the social team needs to actually execute it. You have to take it up to the executive team and maybe the board to get things approved. You can get the information out of ChatGPT of how to do that. But to give the person the confidence to do it and to understand sort of the nuance of how to respond to questions and sort of coaching and advising a client through that process, that's just people need people to do that. And I think people will always need people to do that. So, yeah, to your point, that's where the value is. It's much less in the actual deliverable, obviously still important, but the process of creating the deliverable is less of the human thing that we can do. The human thing we can do is guide people and advise them through these kind of difficult, consensus oriented enterprise level conversations.
Definitely. So, as I said, there were a couple of other things that you touched on that I wanted to probe a little bit more. And one thing that we did talk a little bit about is it seems to me that one of the real values of AI is it can do the repetitive tasks, right? Like even thinking about the discovery process, it's a really important part of the process, but having AI do the research that goes into that so you can gather the research and then draw conclusions. That's a
Hmm.
that's a great way to do it. And I feel like that frees up the mental capacity to do the other things that if you're a marketer, you really love doing, right? Problem solving, strategy,
Hmm.
really creative thinking. And I think of creative thinking is the unconventional bending of established rules. So I like to spend my time there. So it's nice to
Hmm.
have the bandwidth. But what if you are a junior marketer? Where one, how are you going to get that context? Because AI kind of robs you of some of that experience, right? And then
Yeah.
how do you know, okay, well, I want to get into marketing because I love problem solving, but to young people coming up in this business, what would you say to them?
Well, it reminds me a little bit of the conversation around college and just education in general right now. That colleges are having to change the way they assign, essay work and that kind of thing because it's just easy to cheat on now, and so it's more in class work and that kind of thing. That's what I'm hearing. It reminds me of that because I think it takes now, if you're going through university, it takes more intention on the student side to get out of it what they need to. Like they need to actually learn the material. So even if using ChatGPT to write your essay or to synthesize something creates the work and maybe you get a good grade on it, if you didn't learn it, then you didn't get what you needed out of it. And I think that's how junior level people entering their careers, I would recommend thinking about it like that. That there's probably going to be some shortcuts that you can take. Maybe you take those shortcuts if that's part of the process of the company that you're working with is they want you to use AI. I think that's actually very common that like companies want you using AI. Then go ahead and do that. But there is something you lose by not going through the process of thinking something through. And so even if the output is coming from ChatGPT, you still need to read the source material. Like, and we do that still. We dump all the discovery docs into Notebook LLM and create a podcast because it's easier to sort of listen to and absorb content in that format. But you still got to read the PDFs. Like you got to spend the time to do it. I think that's one thing that's important for younger people is your skills are not going to advance as quickly if the slow, hard processing work is done for you. You still have to do it. The challenge is more on the business side of, okay, that's great, but what if there's not enough jobs? That's a bigger concern. I don't have an answer to that. Like, I'm more worried that, okay, it's a lot of people like me who've spent 20 years in the industry and have all these experiences working with big brands and things and all the successes and failures that we've been through so that I can use AI tools and create a lot of value out of them. If there's the next generation, are they going to have those same opportunities? I'm a little worried about that. But I think you have to take as much personal responsibility as you can. Do the work even though you don't have to sometimes. And then I think it's always just staying on top of technology trends. Sort of like what I was saying at the beginning, if you can't fight technology, embrace it, learn it, stay on the forefront of it. There's sort of a trend. This is just what I've been hearing this conversation around AI and innovation. That typically when there's a big innovation that rolls out, you don't use less of it. If something becomes cheaper or more efficient or more powerful, we use more of it. So it's a little scary right now because I think we look at the work world. Okay, there's there's this many clients out there. There's this kind of work out there. It's a zero sum thing. It's like that's what exists. Oh, now AI can do 30% of it. Oh no, 30% of the jobs are gone. That's sort of what it feels like. But that's historically not what happens, is that we do more things. We want more things. So maybe a junior level person 5 years from now is more of you start as an art director, that like there are fewer designers, but there's more art directors. And you're using the AI as a designer, and we just don't have those as people. That's sad to say, but that's one of the things that I think we just have to deal with as a society, that some of these things are just going to be commodities and we'll have to find other ways to provide value. I think everyone's going to have that challenge.
One of the other people that I've interviewed, she has an agency in Massachusetts and they do workforce development in AI training. And one of the things she has written curriculum for Harvard's first marketing AI class or AI marketing class. And one of the things she was talking about, because she does a lot of research in this, was that every technological advancement has made us in some ways dumber. So it was like, even the pen made it so we didn't have to remember as much stuff. So, right, like that
Yeah.
part of your brain, that muscle got weak. And so and that's really kind of what she said. It's not that we got dumber. It's just that those parts of our brains aren't exercised as much. So, but there's more capacity in other parts because that function is no longer required. So like, I think it's the same as, removing mundane tasks so creatives can be more creative. I feel like it's the same thing. Like these mundane things get removed. And so there's room for more creative. So maybe you're right. Maybe it is that they just are able to go right to art director. So this is my last question for you. And, I've been wondering how agencies are experiencing their own business development now, right? Like, do you feel like there are organizations now, businesses, our prospective clients who are now thinking, what do I need an agency for? I'll just start my own chat GPT. And if that is happening, what's your advice for people on how to address that?
Yeah. Well, it has been interesting the past couple of years. I've noticed a difference in new business lead generation. The cadence of it has gone down because we've built a pretty good lead generating machine over the past couple of years, and it's noticeable when AI came on and when it really got adopted more widespread. The work had changed, and there was fewer of it or less of it coming in. I don't know if that's entirely AI, but we've been working through that as a business challenge. That typically, I mean, the agency world, I think, is very referral, word of mouth. It's relationship based, but you need to find ways to meet people you don't know to keep things fresh and keep things interesting. And that has changed a little bit. At this point, I actually don't have a great answer for how like new business needs to evolve. But I think in terms of your question about like the kinds of work that they do, like do they just think, okay, now I could just do this with AI instead of an agency? We're not seeing that yet. I think the expectations are around cost, around speed. I think one thing an agency provides is confidence that by bringing someone else in, or even like a marketing director runs programs, but they don't necessarily create programs all the time. That's why they're bringing the agency in for their seasonal updates or what have you. And so these are always elements that they just need a collaborator on, and it's never going to be a chatbot. So that's still what we're seeing. Like the core need is still there. They need someone to come in, help them think through this, recommend processes, guide them through that process with executive teams and things. And then there's doing the work. It's the doing the work to me is what's shrinking. They're still going to hire you to do it, but you're going to have to do it faster and for less money. That's my current theory. But like you said, we'll see in 6 months
In
if
six
that's
months. Right, and you're positioning yourself for that, so I think that's really forward thinking. It's funny, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Everybody thinks they're a great marketer, right? Like, everybody has an opinion about it, and so, as marketers, we get used to that, right? And you kind of develop a thick skin, you don't take it personally, but I was thinking, I think part of it is because it's relationship building, right? And it's
hmm
fun. It's about relationship building and people. Nobody bothers their accountant. They bother their marketing department or their marketing agency, right? Because no, and I say nobody, there are obviously people who are good at it and who love it. But for a lot of people who are creative, who started a business, that's not what they want to do. And so, right, what we try to always, as an FCMO, what I've really tried to do is work with any founder led organization is to help that founder get out of doing things that they shouldn't do. And I think that's the confidence that agencies bring, right? Like is don't focus on the things that you're not great on. Do the things
Right.
that you are great on and let the people who are great at marketing focus on marketing. That's
Yeah, and that's sort of my meta theme here for the business is move away from production, move towards consultancy, where that kind of advice, relationship building is at the core and not hourly tasks that are quickly being automated away.
so I think that's a great place. I mean, you just summed up our conversation beautifully. So now I don't have to do that. So, Scott, it's been a great conversation. I really thank you for sharing your insights. And I think you're shaking things up, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that works and where the industry heads with that. Before we close out, if we have listeners who want to reach out to you, do you want to give some contact information so people can contact you and either keep having this conversation, or if they're looking for a new website or a rebrand, they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, thank you. So the website is xoagency.com, XO like hugs and kisses. And because we are relationship based, like you can book time with me directly on that website. So that's probably the easiest way to do it. You can find me on LinkedIn too. Uh, xoagency.com. Would love to chat with people.
Awesome. I'll go ahead and drop that into the show notes. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us here at Human at the Helm. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and keep the conversation going about how we can lead smarter in an AI driven world. Until next time.